Kill Box tasted of ozone and cold, recycled metal. It was a taste Kaelen Voss knew intimately, the flavor of sanitized violence. Ganymede's meager gravity, barely a fifth of Earth's, was a constant, unsettling reminder that this wasn't real ground. That the floor beneath his mag-locked boots was just a thin sheet of permacrete, separating him from a hard, indifferent vacuum. His pulse rifle, a Docker -45 stanchion, felt like a toy in the low G. Its weight a familiar lie against his shoulder. Around him, the rest of Scab Squad fanned out into the cavernous chamber. The walls were modular, shifting slabs of gray composite that could reconfigure into 1,000 different tactical nightmares. Today, they formed a labyrinth of tight corridors and blind corners, a perfect grinder for weeding out the hesitant. The only light came from the flat, unforgiving glare of overhead loom strips, casting no shadows, offering no place to hide. Contribute, the voice of the proctor crackled in his helmet comms, a digitized, sexless monotone that was the pure distilled essence of the hegemony. Contribute to the security of the terrene sphere. Your success is the hegemony's strength. Your failure is your own. Kael grunted, the sound absorbed by his helmet's internal dampeners. The hegemony's strength. Right. The same strength that had built his submersible with slag-grade alloys and his career with empty promises. He ran a diagnostic on his HUD, the green-on-black data overlay, flickering to life across his visor. Ammo count, full. Biometrics, stable, heartbeat, a slow, grudging drumbeat. Squad vitals, all in the green. All except for Jax. The kid's heart rate was a frantic hummingbird rhythm, his respiration shallow and fast. He stood nearest the designated entry point, his rifle held so tight, his knuckles were white inside, his tactical gloves. His eyes, visible through his own visor, were wide, darting from one empty corner to the next. Sloane was on the other side of the entry, a picture of calm efficiency. She moved with an economy Kael had come to respect. Her medic's pack secured high on her back, her sidearm holstered but ready. She caught his glance through their visors and gave a short, almost imperceptible nod. A flicker of shared understanding. Watch the kid. Kael keyed his private comm to her. How is he looking to you? Like a string pulled too tight. Her voice came back, low and clinical. BP's probably through the roof. If this was a real-world drop, I'd have him on sedatives. They don't pay us to be comfortable, Kael murmured back. The cynicism a well-worn coat. They don't pay us at all, she corrected, her tone sharp as a scalpel. He couldn't argue with that. The klaxon sounded, a jarring, three-note blast that signaled the start of the exercise. Simulated hostiles deployed, the proctor announced. Objective, reach the extraction point. All hostiles are considered Class 3 threats. Lethal force authorized. A red light above the far doorway blinked on. Extraction, a kilometer of hell away. Kael took point, without being asked. It was a reflex, a ghost of the officer he used to be twitching in the stump of his former life. Jax, you're on my 6. Sloan, rear guard. Move on, my signal. 3 meters spread. He didn't wait for confirmation. He slid into the first corridor, rifle up, sweeping from left to right. The place smelled of sterility and sweat. Every footstep was a dull thud, amplified in the enclosed space. He could feel the vibration of the wall shifters, the low hum of the hard light projectors warming up. This was the hegemony's grand theater, a place to forge weapons from broken people. The first contact came 30 seconds in, a flicker of movement at the end of the hall. Kael's HUD tagged it instantly, a shimmering, indistinct silhouette that resolved into the familiar, terrifying shape of a Xenomorphid warrior. It was a perfect simulation, down to the wet, chitinous sheen of its hide, and the way its biomechanical limbs unfolded with insectile grace. It wasn't real, but the threat response algorithms in his brain didn't care. Adrenaline, cold and sharp, dumped into his bloodstream. He squeezed the trigger. The rifle bucked, spitting a stream of hypersonic flechettes. The simulated rounds had no mass, but the suit's haptic feedback system gave them a phantom kick, a lie to make the training stick. The light construct creature dissolved into a shower of golden pixels. Its simulated screech cut short. "Contact, front," he called out. His voice level 1 down. 2 more flickered into existence from side alcoves. Before he could even adjust his aim, a burst of fire stitched across them from behind him. Jax, the kid, was a surprisingly good shot. His movements jerky but effective. "Nice shooting, Jax," Sloane's voice cut in, a rare note of encouragement. Jax didn't respond. His breathing was a ragged tear in the fabric of the comms channel. They pushed forward, a slow, methodical crawl through the maze. It was a meat grinder by design. Hostiles materialized from walls, dropped from ceiling panels, charged from around blind corners. Kael moved like a machine, the years of training, the real training before his discharge taking over. His mind detached, becoming a cold processor of angles, threats, and ammunition counts. He could feel the ebb and flow of the fight, the rhythm of the algorithm designed to test them. It was predictable. It was rote. Until it wasn't. They were halfway to the extraction point, clearing a 4-way intersection, when Jax stumbled. He dropped to one knee, his rifle clattering against the deck plating. "Jax, what is it? You hit?" Sloane was moving toward him instantly. "Get down," Kael barked, his focus still on the unseen enemy. "Hold position." But Jax wasn't responding. Through the comms, Kael could hear a low, guttural moan, a sound of profound and absolute agony. His vital signs on Kael's HUD went haywire. A chaotic scribble of red lines. "Sloane, talk to me," Kael demanded, his eyes scanning the empty corridors. This felt wrong. The algorithm had a pace. This was a break in the rhythm. "He is convulsing," Sloane said. Her voice strained with effort as she tried to hold the kid steady. "Full tonic-clonic seizure. His core temp is spiking, static." Jax rasped, the word broken and mangled so much. Static. And then it began. "Left," Jax screamed, the sound a raw shriek of pain that overloaded Kael's earpiece. "Wall in the wall." Kael's instincts screamed at him to ignore the ravings of a seizing soldier, to trust the empty readings on his motion tracker. But something in the sheer terror of the boy's voice made him pivot. He aimed his rifle at the blank. Gray wall to his left. The wall dissolved into a swarm of Xenomorphid skulkers, smaller, faster constructs that boiled into the corridor. They hadn't appeared. They had been there the whole time, cloaked, waiting. A silent, perfectly laid ambush the simulation had never thrown at them before. His rifle roared, chewing through the front rank of the light constructs. But there were too many. They flowed around his cone of fire, a river of pixelated death. He was backpedaling, firing, knowing he was about to be overwhelmed. Ceiling. There in the ceiling. Jax shrieked again, his body rigid in Sloane's arms. This time, Kael didn't hesitate. He tilted his rifle up and fired blind into the metal panels above. A section of the ceiling shimmered and vanished, revealing a dozen more skulkers clinging there like bats. His volley of fire tore through them, their dissolving forms raining down as harmless, fading light. It was impossible. The standard sensor suite couldn't detect cloaked units. No one could. It was a designed-in flaw of the tech, a deliberate imperfection to keep soldiers on their toes. But Jax saw them. He saw them all. Right corridor. Heavy. "It's a crusher." The boy sobbed, his voice thin and reedy. Foam flecked his lips, visible on Sloane's helmet cam feed. Kael threw himself sideways, pulling Sloane and the still convulsing Jax with him, just as a creature the size of a cargo hauler smashed through the wall where they had been standing. A Xenomorphid crusher. Its armored headplate was a solid wedge of simulated chitin, designed to shatter fortifications. It bellowed, a sound synthesized to be a perfect replica of rending metal and screaming flesh. A bass-heavy concussion that Kael felt in his bones, even through the suit. His mind was reeling, trying to process the flood of impossible data. The ambush, the cloaked units, the crusher. This wasn't a standard training exercise anymore. This was a slaughter. A slaughter Jax was somehow navigating them through from the depths of his own personal hell. The kid wasn't just having a seizure. He was a beacon. A fire alarm screaming in a house that everyone else thought was empty. Kael's brain shifted gears. He was no longer a recycled grunt. He was Commander Voss again, the man who had held the line at Io against impossible odds. He saw the battlefield not as a corridor, but as a geometry problem. Sloane, pop a flare. "High intensity," he yelled, his voice a hammer blow of command. Now. She reacted instantly, fumbling with her pack with one hand while holding Jax with the other. A magnesium-bright flare shot into the air, bathing the intersection in blinding white light. The hard light constructs, momentarily overloaded by the intense photonic energy, flickered and went translucent in that split second. Kael saw it. A maintenance conduit, barely a meter wide, running along the floor-wall junction behind the crusher. An escape. Jax, Kael shouted, getting right in the kid's faceplate. Where is the next wave? Jax's eyes were rolled back in his head, the whites stark against his skin. His teeth were grinding. Behind. They're coming from behind. A swarm. God, it burns. Good boy, Kael said, the words tasting like ash. He grabbed Jax by the harness. Sloan, with me. We're going through. He dragged them toward the conduit, firing his rifle back down the corridor they'd just come from. Just as Jax had predicted, the far end of the hall was dissolving. A new wave of hostiles pouring through. He laid down a wall of suppressing fire, the barrel of his rifle glowing a dull, simulated red. The crusher was already reforming, its massive shape solidifying. It turned its huge head toward them, its simulated eyes glowing with malevolent, algorithmic intelligence. Go. Get in the conduit. Kael roared at Sloan. She scrambled, pulling Jax with her, squeezing into the tight space. Kael kept firing until his ammo counter blinked red. Then he threw himself in after them, just as the crusher charged. The beast's impact shook the entire structure. The sound, a deafening boom that vibrated through the metal around them. Dust and debris, real this time, rained down from the ceiling, and then silence. The loom strips flickered back to their normal, flat intensity. The red light above the extraction door went dark. A new voice, sharp and human, cut through the comms. Exercise terminated. Scab, squad, stand down. Repeat, stand down. Kael lay there in the conduit, the rhythmic rasp of his own breathing loud in his ears. Sloan was already working on Jax, injecting a cocktail of anticonvulsants and sedatives into his thigh port. The kid's convulsions were subsiding, leaving him limp and pale, a sheen of sweat covering his face. He looked impossibly young. Heavy, mag-locked footsteps approached. Lieutenant Valerius, the Ganymede facility's chief training officer, appeared at the mouth of the conduit. He was a tall, severe man whose face seemed permanently fixed in a mask of stern disapproval. He looked down at them, his eyes lingering on Jax for a long, unreadable moment. Report Voss, Valerius said, his voice flat. Kael pulled himself out of the conduit, his joints aching from the adrenaline crash. He took his helmet off, the recycled air of the kill box suddenly feeling thick and cloying. The simulation parameters were non-standard, Lieutenant. Full-spectrum ambush protocols, cloaked units, a crusher class heavy. We weren't briefed for that. You weren't meant to be, Valerius replied. not a flicker of surprise on his face. He looked past Kael to where Sloane was stabilizing Jax. The boy, status, post-ictal, physically stable for now. Sloane clipped, her voice tight with fury. But he just went through a grand mal seizure under extreme combat duress. What the hell did you think was going to happen? Valerius ignored her, his gaze still fixed on Jax, as if assessing a piece of valuable but malfunctioning equipment. Did he call out the hostiles? The question hung in the air, cold and heavy. Kael felt a chill that had nothing to do with the temperature. This wasn't a debrief. It was a data collection. They hadn't been testing the squad. They had been testing Jax. He did, Kael said, his voice dangerously quiet. He called out every single one, cloaked units included. How? Valerius finally looked at Kael, his eyes as gray and lifeless as the walls around them. Jax is R-type sensitive, what we call a linker. Kael stared at him. The term was new, but the implication was as old as war itself. A new kind of weapon. A new way to bleed a human being dry for a tactical advantage. A psychic, he scoffed, the word tasting like superstitious nonsense. Don't be crude, Voss, Valerius said with a sigh, as if explaining a complex concept to a simple child. There is no magic involved. The Xenomorphid hive mind, as you call it, communicates. It organizes. It does so via a low-frequency bioelectric field, a field most humans are entirely deaf to. A linker is a receiver. They can't transmit, they can't control. They can only listen. They feel the hive's intent, its hunger, its movements. Kael looked back at the unconscious boy, at the line of spittle drying on his chin, the dark circles under his eyes. He thought of Jax's constant nervousness, his jumpiness, the way he always seemed to be listening to a sound no one else could hear. It wasn't paranoia. It was feedback, a constant, screaming torrent of alien consciousness pouring directly into his brain, the static he'd whimpered about. The seizure, Sloane said, her voice trembling with a mixture of horror and dawning comprehension. The neural feedback from the hive signal. It overloads his synaptic pathways. It is literally tearing his brain apart. A manageable side effect. Valerius stated, his tone utterly devoid of empathy. The hegemony is developing neurodampeners to mitigate the condition. For now, we manage the symptoms and collate the data. Collate the data. The words were so sterile, so clean. They were 1,000,000 miles away from the sight of a terrified teenager convulsing on a cold metal floor, screaming about monsters in the walls. Kael looked at Valerius, at the crisp lines of his uniform and the absolute certainty in his eyes, and he felt a familiar, crushing weight settle in his chest. It was the weight of the hegemony, a machine that saw a terrified, suffering boy not as a human being, but as a resource to be exploited, a biological sensor array. an expendable asset. Some wars are fought to be lost. The thought surfaced from the deep, dark parts of his mind. He was fighting the wrong enemy. He had been all along. The real monsters weren't shimmering hard light constructs in a training simulation. They wore uniforms and gave orders and spoke of manageable side effects. He looked from the officer to the broken kid on the floor, and for the first time since he'd been recycled, Kaelen Voss felt the ghost of a purpose stir within him. It wasn't about survival anymore. It was about the boy. He was a weapon, yes, but not the hegemonies. He was Kael's. A weapon to be protected, not used. A fault line in the steel of the regime, and Kael would be damned if he let them just pave over it.